Ed and Terry Coleman's story opens Rich Dad's success stories with a clear lesson. Financial freedom starts when you take control of how you think about money. Both came from modest beginnings, hardworking, responsible, and educated, yet they found themselves trapped in the same paycheck-to-paycheck cycle that most people live in. They earned well but saved little. The turning point came when they read Rich Dad, Poor Dad and realized that they had been working for money instead of making money work for them. The Colemans began to question everything they had been taught about success. Get a good job, save for retirement, buy a home. They recognized these were Poor Dad rules, safe but limiting. Motivated by Rich Dad's philosophy, they shifted their focus toward assets that generate income. Instead of saving in a bank, they started investing in real estate and small business ventures. Their first rental property was small, but it taught them more about money than decades of employment ever did. The biggest shift wasn't financial, it was mental. They stopped seeing risk as something to avoid and started seeing it as something to manage. They learned to use debt strategically, to look for cash flow instead of capital gains, and to value financial education more than job security. Over time, their investments began to cover their living expenses, giving them the financial freedom to quit their traditional jobs. Robert Kiyosaki highlights the Colemans as a perfect example of ordinary people who made extraordinary changes. Their story proves that wealth isn't about luck or background, but about mindset and action. They didn't win the lottery or inherit money. They built their wealth step by step by applying Rich Dad's principles: buy assets, reduce liabilities, and keep learning. By the end of Chapter 1, the reader sees a transformation. Ed and Terry go from employees to investors, from financial stress to financial confidence. The takeaway is simple but powerful. Financial success begins the moment you stop working for money and start making money work for you. Chapter 2 follows Tracy Rodriguez, a single mother who turned her financial struggles into a personal revolution after discovering Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Like many people, Tracy had always believed that hard work and job loyalty were the keys to stability. She worked long hours, juggled multiple responsibilities, and still found herself barely making ends meet. The stress of living paycheck to paycheck became unbearable, not because she was lazy or careless, but because she was following a broken financial script. When she read Robert Kiyosaki's idea of minding your own business, everything clicked. She realized that for years she had been working to build someone else's dream instead of her own. Her job provided a paycheck but no ownership, no leverage, and no path to freedom. Inspired by the Rich Dad philosophy, she decided to create a new financial identity, one that made her the CEO of her own financial life. Tracy started small. She didn't quit her job overnight. Instead, she began studying money, how assets work, how cash flow can be built, and how ordinary people can use entrepreneurship to escape financial dependency. She launched a side business, learned basic accounting, and invested every extra dollar into her education. With each step, her confidence grew. She learned that minding your own business isn't just about owning a company. It's about treating your finances as if they were a business, where every decision has a purpose and every dollar is an employee that must work for you. Her early efforts were met with challenges. She faced fear, skepticism from friends, and the temptation to give up. But her mindset had changed. Instead of reacting to financial problems emotionally, she approached them strategically. Over time, her small side business turned into a consistent source of income, and she began to experience true financial control for the first time in her life. Kiyosaki uses Tracy's story to reinforce one of Rich Dad's core messages. Financial independence begins when you stop relying on your employer to secure your future. Tracy's transformation shows that wealth is built not by working harder, but by thinking smarter, by creating, owning, and growing assets that work for you. The chapter closes with a clear takeaway: don't just earn a living. Build something that earns for you. When you mind your own business, you become the architect of your financial destiny. Chapter 3 tells the story of Cecilia Morrison, a woman who proves that financial freedom has no expiration date. When she first encountered Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cecilia was already in her 50s. She had spent most of her adult life working hard, saving diligently, and following all the traditional financial advice, yet she still felt unprepared for retirement. Her savings were modest, her investments conservative, and her income entirely dependent on her job. The idea of starting over seemed impossible, but Cecilia's perspective changed the moment she understood one of Rich Dad's key lessons. It's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep and how hard it works for you. She realized that her savings were sitting idle, generating little return, while her biggest investment, her time, was tied entirely to her employer. The fear of being too old to learn something new was strong, but the fear of staying stuck was stronger. Determined to take control, Cecilia began studying financial literacy from scratch. She attended local real estate workshops, networked with investors, and slowly gained confidence in managing her own money. Her first step was small, purchasing a duplex that she could rent out. It wasn't perfect, she made mistakes, misjudged tenants, and struggled with repairs. But each setback became a lesson in cash flow, negotiation, and persistence. As her knowledge grew, so did her courage. Cecilia reinvested her profits, acquired more rental properties, and built a portfolio that eventually replaced her full-time income. For the first time, she experienced the peace of mind that comes from knowing her money worked harder than she did. The most powerful part of her journey wasn't the wealth itself. It was the transformation in her mindset. She went from believing she was too late to realizing she was just getting started. Kiyosaki highlights Cecilia's journey to remind readers that financial independence doesn't depend on age, education, or background. It depends on commitment to learning and taking action. Her story breaks the myth that financial change is only for the young or tech-savvy. The chapter's message is clear and timeless. It's never too late to start building wealth, but it's always too soon to quit. Cecilia's story shows that the right mindset, combined with steady action, can rewrite your financial future at any stage of life. Chapter 4 follows David Lucas, a man who built financial confidence through small, consistent steps in real estate investing. When David first read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, he wasn't a millionaire or a seasoned investor. He was an average employee with an above-average desire for freedom. Like many people, he had a stable job but felt trapped by the constant cycle of bills, credit card payments, and uncertainty about the future. Kiyosaki's idea of using assets to create cash flow instead of working harder for a paycheck became a turning point in his thinking. David started by learning the fundamentals of money management. He realized his lack of financial education had kept him dependent on his job. So he made a commitment to become a lifelong learner, reading books, attending real estate seminars, and surrounding himself with people who were already financially independent. His first investment wasn't glamorous, a small, affordable rental property in a modest neighborhood. But to him, it was the beginning of something much bigger. Proof that financial growth is possible when you take action. That first deal taught David the power of confidence. The experience wasn't perfect. He made mistakes with financing, underestimated maintenance costs, and learned hard lessons about tenants. But instead of seeing those problems as failures, he treated them as tuition for his financial education. Each property he purchased improved his understanding of leverage, negotiation, and cash flow. Over time, his small wins compounded into real wealth. The central theme of David's story is progress through experience. He didn't wait for the perfect time or a massive lump sum of money. He built momentum one decision at a time. Kiyosaki uses his story to illustrate that confidence is earned, not inherited, and that every investor must start small before they can think big. Eventually, David reached a point where his rental income covered most of his expenses. More importantly, he gained something far more valuable than money: control over his future. His journey demonstrates that financial independence doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of consistent learning, calculated risk-taking, and a belief in your ability to grow. The key takeaway from Chapter 4 is powerful. You don't need to be rich to start investing. You become rich by starting. Every property, every lesson, and every small win builds the foundation for lasting financial confidence. Chapter 5 centers on Dr. Valerie L. Collymore, a successful physician who discovered that academic intelligence does not automatically translate into financial intelligence. Valerie had spent years in medical school, earning one of the most respected and stable professions in society. She had what most people would consider the perfect career, a high income, prestige, and job security. Yet, despite her impressive credentials, she found herself financially stressed. Her money flowed out as quickly as it came in, trapped by mortgages, taxes, and lifestyle expenses. When she read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the message hit hard. The traditional education system teaches people how to work for money, not how to make money work for them. Valerie realized that while she was highly educated in medicine, she was financially illiterate. Her income depended entirely on her ability to keep working, and if she stopped, her income stopped too. This realization became the catalyst for her different education, a self-directed journey into financial literacy and investing. Valerie began with the basics. She studied accounting, learned the language of money, and analyzed how assets and liabilities actually behaved. Her goal wasn't to quit medicine, but to make sure her money worked as hard as she did. She started investing in real estate, initially small properties that she could manage part-time. Like many beginners, she made mistakes, misjudging markets, underestimating repairs, and dealing with tenant issues. But every misstep deepened her understanding. The more she learned, the more empowered she felt. Valerie came to see money not as a source of stress, but as a tool. She built passive income streams that allowed her to practice medicine on her own terms, without financial pressure. Her transformation demonstrated that financial freedom isn't limited to entrepreneurs. Even professionals can achieve it once they embrace financial education. Kiyosaki uses Valeri's story to make a critical point. Formal education can prepare you for a job, but financial education prepares you for life. The two are not the same. True wealth requires understanding how money flows, how assets generate income, and how to think like an investor. The core message of Chapter 5 is clear. Your degree can earn you a living, but financial education can buy you freedom. Valeri's different education reminds readers that the smartest investment you can make is in your own financial intelligence. Chapter 6 focuses on Reed J. Schweizer, whose story captures the moment when financial education meets decisive action. Reed wasn't born into wealth, nor did he possess advanced financial knowledge. He was an ordinary employee with a comfortable lifestyle, until he realized that comfortable and secure are not the same thing. The turning point came when he read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and understood the difference between working for money and having money work for you. He saw clearly that his job, though steady, would never give him the freedom he wanted. Reed decided it was time to step up to the plate, to stop waiting for perfect conditions, and start taking calculated risks. He began studying the Rich Dad principles, especially the importance of financial education, cash flow, and asset building. Like many new investors, he initially struggled with fear of losing money, fear of making mistakes, and fear of the unknown. But he also realized that staying still was its own form of risk. As Kiyosaki often says, the biggest risk is doing nothing. Reed's first step was investing in real estate. He started small, purchasing a duplex that generated positive cash flow. It wasn't a flawless deal. He faced tenant issues, unexpected repairs, and moments of doubt. Yet every obstacle became a practical lesson in managing money and managing mindset. He learned that financial success doesn't come from perfection, but from persistence. Each investment improved his confidence, teaching him how to analyze deals, leverage financing, and turn setbacks into strategy. Over time, Reed expanded his portfolio and began mentoring others who wanted to follow the same path. His biggest lesson was that taking action creates momentum. While many people spend years reading and planning, few actually step up to the plate and swing. Reed's success came not from luck or timing, but from consistent action backed by financial understanding. Kiyosaki uses this story to emphasize that financial education without execution is wasted potential. The book knowledge must be applied in real life, even if mistakes happen. Reed's journey embodies the courage to act, to move from theory to experience. The takeaway from Chapter 6 is straightforward yet powerful. Opportunity doesn't wait for confidence. Confidence comes from taking the first step. When you decide to act, you move from being a spectator in your financial life to being the player who shapes the outcome. Chapter 7 tells the story of Dan McKenzie, a man who discovered that true wealth is not just about money, it's about purpose, mindset, and the good that financial freedom can create. Dan's journey began in a place familiar to many, working hard, earning a decent income, but feeling trapped in the endless cycle of bills and obligations. Despite years of effort, he couldn't seem to get ahead. The more he worked, the less time he had for his family and passions. When he read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, one concept struck him deeply. Money itself isn't the root of all evil. The lack of financial understanding is. That idea completely reframed his beliefs about wealth. He had been taught that wanting to be rich was selfish, but Kiyosaki's philosophy helped him see that money is simply a tool. In the hands of a financially educated person, it can be used for good, to build, to serve, and to create opportunities. This realization became the foundation for Dan's transformation. Dan began his financial education with humility. He studied the principles of assets versus liabilities, cash flow, and leverage. His first step into investing came through real estate, but his motivation wasn't just profit. He wanted to build a future where he could spend more time with his family and contribute to his community. His first rental property wasn't perfect, but it gave him something far more valuable than income: confidence and purpose. As his portfolio grew, Dan noticed a change in his mindset. He no longer saw money as something scarce or risky, but as a resource that could multiply when used wisely. With every deal, he applied Rich Dad's lessons: focus on long-term cash flow, use debt strategically, and never stop learning. Financial independence gave him freedom, but more importantly, it gave him time to mentor others and invest in causes he believed in. Kiyosaki highlights Dan's story as proof that money amplifies who you are. If you're responsible and purpose-driven, wealth allows you to do more good. Financial education is not about greed, it's about empowerment. The key takeaway from Chapter 7 is clear. Money is not the root of evil, ignorance is. When you learn how money truly works, you gain the ability to use it wisely, create impact, and turn financial success into something meaningful and lasting. Chapter 8 follows Thomas G. Cutula, a man who discovered that true wealth isn't about sudden luck. It's about building lasting financial intelligence. The title, Better Than Winning the Lottery, captures his belief that financial freedom earned through education and discipline is far more rewarding than any one-time windfall. Before finding Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Thomas lived what most would call a stable life. He had a reliable job, a steady income, and a comfortable lifestyle. Yet, despite outward success, he felt financially insecure. He had watched friends and colleagues earn more, spend more, and end up in the same place, stressed about bills and fearful of the future. When he read Robert Kiyosaki's philosophy, it hit him like a revelation. Money itself wasn't the solution. Understanding how it worked was. Thomas began to see how people who win the lottery often lose everything within a few years, not because they lack money, but because they lack financial education. Wealth without knowledge is temporary. This became his mantra. He decided to build his financial future the Rich Dad way, starting small, learning continuously, and prioritizing assets that produce income. His first major move was into real estate investing. He didn't have a big inheritance or a pile of cash. What he had was curiosity and a willingness to learn. He studied deals, attended workshops, and built relationships with experienced investors. The first property he bought was modest, but it generated steady cash flow. That success, though small, felt better than any short-term win because it was the result of understanding, not luck. Over time, Thomas built multiple income streams through property and small business investments. He began to experience what Kiyosaki calls financial confidence, the calm assurance that comes from controlling your own income sources. He no longer feared market downturns or job instability because his financial foundation wasn't built on chance, it was built on knowledge and systems. Kiyosaki uses Thomas's story to underline one of his core lessons. Real wealth is measured by freedom, not fortune. The people who win with money are those who keep learning and applying what they learn. The takeaway from Chapter 8 is powerful and practical. Education beats luck. When you build financial intelligence step by step, you create results that no lottery ticket can ever match. consistent, growing, and completely under your control. Chapter 9 tells the story of Wade and Carol Yamamoto, a married couple who turned financial stress into partnership-driven success. By applying Rich Dad's principles together, their story highlights one of Robert Kiyosaki's most practical lessons: that building wealth isn't just a financial process, but also a mindset shared by both partners. Before discovering Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the Yamamotos were like many hardworking couples. They earned decent incomes, managed a household, and tried to save for retirement. But despite their efforts, they often disagreed about money. Wade wanted to invest, while Carol preferred the security of saving. Their financial decisions were cautious and reactive, shaped by fear of risk, rather than by strategy. As their expenses grew, so did their stress. The idea of financial independence felt distant, even impossible. Everything changed when they read Kiyosaki's concept of mind your own business. They realized that their jobs kept them busy working for others' wealth, while their own financial future remained undeveloped. For the first time, they decided to take charge together, to make a mutual decision to educate themselves financially and act as a team. This shift in mindset marked the beginning of their transformation. They started small, attending Rich Dad workshops, reading books on investing, and tracking their cash flow. Instead of arguing about money, they began setting goals together, focusing on acquiring assets instead of liabilities. Their first investment was modest, a rental property purchased with limited savings and plenty of hesitation. But when the property started producing steady cash flow, their confidence grew. Through experience, the Yamamotos learned how communication and alignment were just as important as numbers. They discussed risks openly, divided responsibilities, and celebrated small wins. Each new investment strengthened their financial literacy and deepened their partnership. Over time, their portfolio expanded, allowing them to reduce their dependency on traditional employment and gain control over their time and future. Kiyosaki uses their story to illustrate that wealth creation works best when couples share the same vision. Financial education doesn't just improve bank accounts, it strengthens relationships through shared goals and trust. The lesson from Chapter 9 is clear and actionable. True financial success is a team effort. When both partners commit to learning, planning, and building together, money stops being a source of tension and becomes a tool for freedom. The Yamamotos prove that cooperation and education can turn financial pressure into long-term prosperity. Chapter 10 introduces Merst Hall, whose story demonstrates how collaboration and shared vision can multiply financial results. Titled The Power of Three, this chapter highlights a key Rich Dad principle: leveraging relationships and teamwork to accelerate success. Merced's journey shows that wealth creation isn't always a solo effort. Sometimes it takes the right people working toward a common goal. Before discovering Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Merst lived by the traditional financial formula: work hard, save, and hope for a comfortable retirement. She had a steady career and a reliable paycheck, but felt that her life was stuck in repeat mode. Like many, she feared investing because she associated it with risk and potential loss. The Rich Dad lessons completely reframed her thinking, teaching her that not investing was actually the greater risk. The book's message about acquiring assets, understanding cash flow, and using knowledge over fear became her personal blueprint for change. Merst realized she didn't have to do it alone. She teamed up with two friends who shared the same desire for financial freedom. Each brought something different to the table. One had business experience, another had technical knowledge, and Merst brought organization and persistence. Together, they represented what Kiyosaki calls synergy, the idea that combined financial intelligence is more powerful than individual effort. Their first project was a small real estate investment. They pooled their savings, divided responsibilities, and learned by doing. The experience wasn't easy. There were disagreements, unexpected expenses, and moments of uncertainty, but they stuck to their shared goal. With every challenge, they applied Rich Dad's principles, learned from mistakes, keep the focus on cash flow, and never stop improving. Over time, their teamwork paid off, and the property became profitable. Encouraged by success, they expanded into additional ventures, each one more strategic than the last. Merced's biggest realization was that the power of three extended beyond money. It created accountability, support, and motivation. The partnership kept her disciplined and focused, proving that collaboration can be a major advantage in personal finance. Kiyosaki uses this story to emphasize that building wealth is not about competition. It's about cooperation and education. Financial independence grows faster when you align with people who share your values and goals. The key takeaway from Chapter 10 is simple but impactful. You go faster alone, but you go further together. With shared vision, trust, and education, teamwork becomes one of the most powerful assets in achieving financial freedom. Chapter 11 tells the story of Ken Hobson, a man who learned that lasting financial success begins not with money, but with mindset. His story, Change of Mind, captures one of Robert Kiyosaki's core lessons. Your thoughts about money determine your financial destiny. Before reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Ken was an employee with a stable job, comfortable paycheck, and conventional outlook on success. He believed that hard work, loyalty, and a steady income would eventually lead to security. But as expenses grew and retirement seemed distant, he began to question that formula. What struck Ken most about Kiyosaki's message was that the poor and middle class work for money, while the rich make money work for them. This single idea challenged everything he had been taught. For years, he had measured success by his salary and job title. But when he examined his financial reality, he realized he had no assets producing income, only liabilities consuming it. That realization became the turning point. Ken decided to reprogram his mindset. Instead of thinking like an employee, he began thinking like an investor. He immersed himself in financial education, studying cash flow, leverage, and the psychology of wealth. The shift wasn't instant, but gradual. He started small, buying his first investment property, learning how to evaluate deals, and managing the fears that came with taking financial risks. Each experience reinforced the lesson that financial intelligence is developed through action, not theory. As Ken's confidence grew, so did his portfolio. He began to see opportunities where others saw obstacles. Even mistakes became valuable teachers. He learned how to use debt strategically, how to structure deals for cash flow, and how to keep emotions from clouding financial decisions. Over time, his income from assets started to exceed his paycheck, proof that his new mindset was working. Kiyosaki uses Ken's story to demonstrate that financial change doesn't start with more money. It starts with a new way of thinking. The biggest barrier to wealth is not lack of opportunity, but lack of financial awareness. Ken's change of mind shows how shifting from a scarcity mindset to an abundance mindset creates space for growth, learning, and freedom. The takeaway from Chapter 11 is clear. Before your income can grow, your mindset must expand. When you change how you think about money, you change how money flows into your life, turning financial struggle into financial confidence. Chapter 12, Never Too Early, introduces Alison Kabbalah, a young woman who embodies the rich dad philosophy, that financial education should begin as early as possible. While most people wait until adulthood to think about money, Alison started her financial journey in her teenage years. Her story challenges the traditional belief that wealth building is only for adults with established careers. Instead, she proves that with curiosity, discipline, and education, anyone can start creating financial freedom early in life. Allison's parents had shared Rich Dad, Poor Dad with her when she was still in high school. Unlike many of her peers, she didn't see money as something mysterious or controlled by others. She saw it as a skill, something to learn, manage, and master. What stood out most to her was Kiyosaki's distinction between assets and liabilities. While her friends were focused on buying things that looked impressive, Allison began thinking about how to acquire assets that could generate cash flow. Her first real lesson came when she decided to start a small business. Instead of working a traditional part-time job, with limited funds, she created a service-based venture that taught her the basics of accounting, marketing, and customer management. She made mistakes, pricing too low, underestimating costs, but each challenge gave her first-hand experience in financial problem solving. Most importantly, She learned how to think like an entrepreneur rather than an employee. As Allison continued studying Rich Dad's concepts, she started investing the profits from her business. She explored real estate, learned about passive income, and even began teaching her friends about basic financial literacy. Her story illustrates that financial success is not about age, but about attitude. By choosing education and initiative over fear and procrastination, she built a foundation most people don't achieve until decades later. Kiyosaki highlights Allison's journey to make a powerful point. It's never too early to learn how money works. Schools may not teach financial literacy, but young people can still educate themselves through books, mentors, and experience. The earlier you start, the more time your money has to grow and compound. The takeaway from Chapter 12 is straightforward and inspiring. Financial freedom doesn't have an age limit. It has a mindset limit. By starting early, Allison didn't just gain wealth. She gained control, confidence, and a lifelong advantage that will continue to multiply as she grows. Chapter 13, Playing a Winning Game, tells the story of Jake Coleman, the son of Ed and Terry Coleman, the couple featured in Chapter 1. His journey shows how financial education, when passed from one generation to the next, can completely reshape a family's financial future. Jake's story represents the next step in the Rich Dad philosophy, teaching children to think like investors, not employees, so they can start playing the money game to win, not just to survive. Growing up, Jake watched his parents transition from employees to investors. He saw firsthand the difference between struggling to make ends meet and creating income through assets. What most impressed him was not how much money his parents made, but how much control they gained over their time and choices. That exposure inspired him to learn about money early, long before his peers cared about financial independence. Jake absorbed the Rich Dad lessons naturally: understand cash flow, distinguish between assets and liabilities, and invest in education before investing money. He started applying those lessons while still in school. Instead of getting a part-time job just to earn spending money, Jake looked for ways to build small sources of passive income. He started with buying and selling used electronics, a simple business that taught him profit margins, cost management, and reinvestment. Over time, those lessons built his confidence and sharpened his entrepreneurial instincts. When he turned 18, Jake invested in his first small real estate deal with the guidance of his parents. The experience wasn't perfect. He faced financing challenges and property management issues, but it taught him the discipline of due diligence and cash flow analysis. By learning through real action rather than theory, he built practical financial intelligence early in life. Kiyosaki uses Jake's story to highlight the importance of generational financial education. The Rich Dad philosophy isn't about quick riches. It's about passing on the mindset of independence and accountability. Jake's success shows what's possible when financial literacy becomes part of a family culture, rather than a personal hobby. The core takeaway from Chapter 13 is simple but transformative. Teach your children to see money as a game and give them the skills to win it. When financial education starts early and is reinforced through experience, young people grow into adults who control their destiny instead of depending on a paycheck. Chapter 14, We Want a HELP, features two young entrepreneurs, David Jose and Michael Slate, who used a Rich Dad philosophy to create both financial success and social impact. Their story captures one of Robert Kiyosaki's most meaningful lessons. True wealth is not only about personal gain, but also about using financial intelligence to help others. The acronym HELP stands for Helping Everyone Learn Prosperity, a mindset that defines their mission and business model. Before discovering Rich Dad, Poor Dad, David and Michael shared the same frustration as many young professionals. They were hardworking, but trapped in traditional thinking about money. They followed the standard formula of working hard, saving, and hoping that things would eventually improve. But when they read Kiyosaki's teachings, everything changed. The idea that financial education, not high income, was the foundation of freedom opened their eyes. They realized that while most people worked for money, the truly wealthy work to acquire knowledge and build systems that generate income. Inspired by this shift in perspective, they decided to act. David and Michael began attending financial workshops and networking with investors. They learned the importance of cash flow, leverage, and building assets instead of liabilities. Soon, they founded a company built on the Rich Dad philosophy, one that combined entrepreneurship with education. Their mission was simple: teach others how to achieve financial independence through real-life learning. Their first steps weren't easy. They faced skepticism, financial challenges, and the steep learning curve that comes with building a business from scratch. But every obstacle reinforced what they had learned from Kiyosaki: that failure is part of the process, and education is the best investment you can make. By staying focused on their purpose and continuing to learn, their company began to grow. Over time, they reached more people, spreading financial literacy and helping others experience the same breakthroughs that changed their own lives. Kiyosaki highlights their story as an example of wealth with purpose. The Rich Dad philosophy isn't just about escaping the rat race. It's about empowering others to do the same. When knowledge is shared, everyone benefits. The key takeaway from Chapter 14 is powerful. Financial freedom means little if it doesn't create value beyond yourself. David and Michael's journey shows that the highest form of wealth comes from helping others achieve their own. Their story proves that when you use money and education to uplift others, you multiply both impact and prosperity. Chapter 15, Accounting for Ourselves, features Tom Wheelwright, a tax strategist and CPA who became one of Robert Kiyosaki's key advisors, and later co-author of Tax-Free Wealth. His story demonstrates a vital principle of the Rich Dad philosophy. Financial freedom requires understanding how money, taxes, and business systems work together. For Tom, accounting wasn't just about numbers. It was about mastering the language of money. Early in his career, Tom worked for major accounting firms, advising large corporations and high-net-worth clients. He noticed a clear divide between the wealthy and everyone else. The rich used the tax system strategically, while the middle class feared it. Most people saw taxes as punishment. The wealthy saw them as incentives, rewards for activities that benefit the economy, such as investing, creating jobs, or building housing. That insight changed the way Tom viewed his profession and his own financial goals. After reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Tom recognized how closely Kiyosaki's ideas aligned with what he had observed professionally. Both men understood that financial education, not income, determines wealth. Tom realized that most individuals fail financially not because they earn too little, but because they don't understand the rules of money. Determined to help others bridge that gap, he founded his own accounting and advisory firm focused on teaching clients how to structure their finances for growth, protection, and efficiency. Tom applied the same Rich Dad principles he taught. Instead of relying solely on a paycheck, he built a business that generated passive income and created value for others. He learned to view taxes as part of his investment strategy, not an unavoidable expense, but a tool to optimize cash flow. His clients, including Kiyosaki himself, benefited from this shift in perspective. Through Tom's story, Kiyosaki underscores a crucial message: understanding money requires learning its language, accounting. Without that knowledge, people make blind financial decisions, depend on others, and lose control of their wealth. Accounting, when used strategically, becomes empowerment. The takeaway from Chapter 15 is direct and practical. If you want to be rich, you must take accountability literally. Learn the numbers, study the tax code, and treat money like a system you can master. Tom Wheelwright's journey proves that financial literacy isn't about avoiding taxes or cutting corners. It's about using knowledge to make the system work for you instead of against you. Chapter 16, A New Strategy, follows Brian Eaglehart, a man who discovered that financial independence isn't achieved by working harder. It's achieved by changing your strategy. His story embodies one of Robert Kiyosaki's most important lessons. Wealth is not about how much you earn, but how you think and how you use the money you have. Before encountering Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Brian lived by the traditional financial playbook. He had a secure job, a steady paycheck, and a growing list of expenses. Despite working long hours, he felt trapped. The more he earned, the more he spent, chasing a lifestyle instead of building assets. deep down, he knew that working harder wasn't the answer. What he lacked wasn't motivation, it was a plan. Everything changed when he discovered Kiyosaki's concept of financial strategy. The Rich Dad philosophy taught him that money follows those who think differently, those who focus on creating cash flow, not just collecting paychecks. Brian realized that if he wanted new results, he needed a new strategy, shift from being an employee to being an investor. His first move was to study financial education. He learned to read income statements, analyze assets, and evaluate risk. Instead of saving for the long term and hoping for security, he began investing for cash flow and growth. Real estate became his main focus, not because it was easy, but because it allowed him to control his returns. His first property wasn't perfect, but it became a classroom in financial thinking. He learned about leverage, market cycles, and how to make money even when others were afraid to invest. As Brian's knowledge grew, so did his confidence. His strategy evolved from playing defense, cutting expenses and saving, to playing offense, acquiring assets, reinvesting profits, and building multiple income streams. Over time, his investments began to replace his job income, giving him the freedom to choose how he spent his time. Kiyosaki highlights Brian's journey to illustrate that financial freedom isn't accidental. It's engineered. Without strategy, effort alone leads to exhaustion. With the right plan, even small amounts of money can create lasting wealth. The key takeaway from Chapter 16 is crystal clear. Success in money is not about effort. It's about direction. When you adopt a strategy based on education, cash flow, and smart risk-taking, you stop working for money and start having money work for you. Chapter 17, Fast Learner, features Michelle Labrosse, an engineer, entrepreneur, and educator who embodies the Rich Dad philosophy that financial education is a lifelong process of learning, testing, and adapting. Her story shows how curiosity, speed of learning, and willingness to act can transform financial outcomes faster than conventional success ever could. Michelle had built an impressive career. As a professional engineer and business owner, she understood systems efficiency and productivity. Yet, like many high achievers, she initially focused only on professional success, not financial independence. Her business earned well, but her money wasn't working for her. Reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad changed that perspective entirely. Kiyosaki's message, work to learn, not to earn, resonated deeply with her analytical mindset. She realized that while she had mastered technical knowledge, she had never been taught the rules of money. That awareness became her motivation to learn fast. Michelle approached financial education the same way she approached engineering, through disciplined experimentation. She devoured books, attended workshops, and built her own models for cash flow and asset management. Instead of fearing mistakes, she viewed them as feedback, data to improve her financial strategy. Michelle applied what she learned immediately. She diversified her business income, started investing in real estate, and created systems that produced recurring revenue. Her technical background helped her see money as a process, not a mystery. Each deal, each project, and each financial challenge became an opportunity to refine her understanding of how wealth works. Her biggest breakthrough came when she shifted her mindset from earning income to building infrastructure for income. By creating processes that generated value even when she wasn't directly involved, Michelle achieved both financial and time freedom. She no longer traded hours for dollars. Her money and systems worked independently of her effort. Kiyosaki uses Michelle's story to demonstrate that intelligence is not limited to academics. It's about adaptability. The people who learn quickly, apply consistently, and think independently are the ones who thrive financially. Michelle's success wasn't about luck or timing. It was about action informed by continuous learning. The core takeaway from Chapter 17 is direct and empowering. The faster you learn, the faster you earn. In a world that changes quickly, financial agility, not just knowledge, becomes your greatest asset. Michelle Labrosse proves that when you commit to learning fast and applying what you know, wealth follows naturally. Chapter 18, No Limits, tells the inspiring story of Terry Bowersock, an entrepreneur who proves that financial success comes not from resources, but from resourcefulness. Her journey embodies one of Robert Kiyosaki's core beliefs, that wealth begins in the mind. When you remove self-imposed limits, you open the door to opportunities that others can't even see. Terry's background was far from privileged. She struggled academically and was labeled as a student with learning difficulties. Society didn't expect much from her, but Terry refused to let that define her. From an early age, she possessed strong determination and creativity, traits that would later become her greatest financial assets. Instead of focusing on what she lacked, she focused on what she could do differently. Her entrepreneurial journey began when she started a small business selling refurbished furniture out of her mother's garage. Most people saw it as a side hustle. Terry saw it as a vehicle for freedom, applying principles that would later echo the rich dad mindset. She reinvested profits into growing the business, studied what customers wanted, and learned how to make money work for her. Through persistence and experimentation, her small venture evolved into Terry's Consign and Design, a multi-million-dollar consignment furniture business. When she discovered Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Terry realized that she had instinctively followed Kiyosaki's lessons all along. Focus on building assets, not working for wages, learn continuously, and never let fear stop action. She also understood another critical Rich Dad principle: business is the ultimate investment. By owning and scaling her business, Terry created leverage, turning her time, team, and systems into engines of income. Her path wasn't free of challenges. She faced cash flow issues, market shifts, and skepticism from others. Yet, her mindset remained her strongest weapon. Every obstacle became a lesson, every setback a chance to adapt. She never viewed failure as the end, only as feedback. That resilience, rooted in the belief that there are no limits, became the foundation of her long-term success. Kiyosaki highlights Terry's story to show that wealth creation doesn't depend on education, privilege, or luck. It depends on mindset and persistence. The takeaway from Chapter 18 is clear: your limitations exist only in your thinking. Terry Bowersick's journey proves that when you remove mental barriers, stay committed to learning, and take consistent action, you can achieve financial freedom no matter where you start. Chapter 19, Greener Pastures, tells the story of Stacy Baker, a woman who learned that true financial freedom doesn't come from running away from problems. It comes from changing how you think about opportunity. Her story captures the essence of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad philosophy. Wealth isn't found by chasing a higher paycheck, but by creating value and building assets wherever you are. Stacy began her career like many others, hardworking, dependable, and committed to doing things the right way. She believed that job loyalty and steady income would eventually lead to stability. Yet, after years of working long hours, she realized she wasn't moving forward financially. Her salary increased slightly, but her freedom didn't. Bills, taxes, and inflation kept her in a cycle that felt impossible to escape. When she read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, one principle struck her: the grass isn't greener somewhere else. It's greener where you water it. That message became the turning point in her financial life. Instead of chasing promotions or switching jobs, Stacy decided to shift her mindset. She stopped looking for external solutions and started building internal ones: financial literacy, confidence, and control. She began to view her income not as an end, but as seed money to create assets. Her focus moved from how much she earned to how much she kept and multiplied. Stacy's first step was real estate. She started small, investing in a property that produced modest but steady cash flow. She faced challenges, tight budgets, maintenance costs, and self-doubt, but she refused to retreat. Each mistake became a lesson, reinforcing what Kiyosaki teaches: you don't learn by talking about investing. You learn by doing it. Over time, she expanded her portfolio, gained experience, and built confidence in her financial decision-making. What makes Stacy's story powerful is not just her financial turnaround, but her mental one. She stopped believing that wealth belonged only to the lucky or the privileged. Instead, she proved that knowledge and persistence could create opportunity from any situation. Kiyosaki uses her story to remind readers that chasing greener pastures, new jobs, higher salaries, or quick wins rarely leads to freedom. True wealth grows when you cultivate it patiently through financial education and consistent action. The key takeaway from Chapter 19 is simple. The grass isn't greener elsewhere. It's greener where you grow it. Stacey Baker's journey proves that once you shift your mindset, every environment can become fertile ground for financial success. Chapter 20, A Winning Strategy, follows Yongsik Shin, an immigrant entrepreneur whose story captures one of Robert Kiyosaki's central lessons, that financial freedom is not a matter of circumstance, but of mindset and planning. Yongsik came to the United States with limited English skills, modest savings, and the same dream shared by millions to build a better life. But what made him different was his willingness to think strategically about money, rather than emotionally. At first, Yongsik did what most people do. He worked tirelessly, took extra shifts, and tried to save as much as possible. Despite his discipline, progress felt slow. The harder he worked, the more he realized that saving alone would never make him free. The turning point came when he discovered Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The idea that wealth is created by strategy, not labor, completely changed how he approached his finances. Kiyosaki's teachings gave him a new formula: use knowledge to multiply effort. Instead of trading effort for money, Yongsik started by developing a personal winning strategy. He mapped out clear goals, learned the fundamentals of cash flow investing, and began treating his finances like a business. His first step was real estate, a small duplex purchased after months of research and hesitation. The experience wasn't perfect. He made mistakes, underestimated expenses, and faced cultural barriers. Yet, he refused to quit. Each problem became a real-world lesson in leverage, negotiation, and risk management. Over time, his investments grew. What began as a single property evolved into a portfolio that produced consistent income. More importantly, Yongsik learned that a strategy built on education and persistence beats luck every time. He also discovered the psychological side of wealth, that patience and long-term thinking are essential ingredients of success. His journey became proof that financial strategy transcends background, language, or origin. Kiyosaki highlights Yongsik's story as a model of intentional wealth building. Financial independence doesn't come from working harder, but from developing a plan. Applying knowledge and executing with discipline, strategy turns ambition into results. The takeaway from Chapter 20 is powerful. You don't need a perfect background to win. You need a winning strategy. Yongsik Shin's story proves that when you combine vision, financial education, and consistent action, you can transform humble beginnings into lasting prosperity. Chapter 21, On the Edge of Retirement, tells the story of Ronald Hoard, a man who discovered that it's never too late to take control of your financial future. His journey reflects one of Robert Kiyosaki's most reassuring lessons. Age is not a limitation. When it comes to learning, investing, or building wealth, what matters most is the decision to start. Ronald spent most of his adult life doing what society told him to do: work hard, stay loyal to one company, and save for retirement. For decades, he played by the traditional rules of money: contribute to a pension, pay off debt, and hope that everything would be fine in the end. But as he approached retirement age, the reality was different. Rising expenses, market uncertainty, and insufficient savings left him feeling anxious about the future. He realized that the secure path he had trusted his whole life wasn't as secure as he thought. Reading Rich Dad, Poor Dad became a wake-up call. The idea that financial freedom is built through assets, not just income, shifted his entire perspective. Ronald realized he had been a dedicated worker but a passive learner. He knew how to earn money, but not how to make it work for him. Determined to change that, he began studying financial literacy even though many told him it was too late. His first step was modest: investing in small rental properties and learning the mechanics of cash flow. He faced skepticism, mistakes, and the discomfort of entering a new field late in life. But each investment, no matter how small, gave him both knowledge and confidence. Slowly, his mindset evolved from one of fear to one of empowerment. Over time, Ronald built a portfolio that supplemented his retirement income and gave him the peace of mind he had always wanted. More importantly, he found a renewed sense of purpose. Instead of seeing retirement as the end of productivity, he saw it as the beginning of freedom, the stage of life where his money could finally work for him. Kiyosaki uses Ronald's story to emphasize that financial education is timeless. Whether you're 25 or 65, the principles of wealth remain the same: learn, act, and keep going. The key takeaway from Chapter 21 is clear: retirement is not an age, it's a financial condition. Ronald Hoard proves that with education, courage, and consistency, anyone can rewrite their financial story, even on the edge of retirement. Chapter 22, Second Chance, closes the book with the story of Michael Meriton, a man who hit financial rock bottom before rebuilding his life using the Rich Dad principles. His journey captures one of Robert Kiyosaki's most powerful messages: failure isn't the end, it's feedback. What determines your future isn't how much money you lose, but how quickly you learn and rise again. Michael's story begins with success, or what he thought was success. He had a high-paying corporate job, a comfortable lifestyle, and the outward signs of financial achievement: a nice home, new car, and prestige. But when the company he worked for downsized, his income disappeared overnight. With no real assets and plenty of debt, Michael quickly realized that he had been financially fragile all along. The illusion of security vanished, replaced by fear and regret. In his search for answers, he came across Rich Dad, Poor Dad. The book's message struck him like lightning. True financial independence doesn't come from a paycheck, but from owning income-producing assets. Kiyosaki's philosophy gave him what he needed most: a second chance, not just financially, but mentally. For the first time, Michael took full responsibility for his financial education. He started small, studying real estate and personal finance, with limited capital. He focused on learning rather than earning. He attended seminars, built relationships with investors, and took action despite fear. His first deal was modest: a rental property that produced positive cash flow, but it represented something far greater: momentum. Each success rebuilt his confidence, and each mistake taught him resilience. As his knowledge grew, Michael diversified into multiple streams of income. Slowly, he replaced his employee mindset with an investor's mindset. The freedom he once thought he had lost was now within his control, not given by a company, but created by his own decisions. His second chance became proof that financial freedom is always available to those willing to learn, adapt, and persist. Kiyosaki ends with Michael's story for a reason. It embodies the Rich Dad philosophy in action. Financial education isn't about perfection, it's about progress. The past doesn't define you, your choices do. The takeaway from Chapter 22 is deeply motivational. You can always start over, no matter where you are. Michael Meriton's second chance is a reminder that failure can be the foundation of financial freedom if you use it as fuel to grow smarter, stronger, and more intentional. Rich Dad's Success Stories is more than a collection of financial success tales. It's a roadmap showing how ordinary people from every background can apply Rich Dad principles to achieve financial freedom. Across 20 real-life stories, readers see what happens when Kiyosaki's lessons about cash flow, mindset, and financial education move from theory to action. Each chapter follows individuals and families who broke free from the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle by shifting how they think about money. From young entrepreneurs like Alison Kabbalah to professionals like Dr. Valerie Callamore and late bloomers like Ronald Hoard, every story reinforces one simple truth: financial freedom is not about age, income, or luck. It's about education and action. The book's message is consistent: learn how money works, buy assets that generate income, and never stop learning. Those who take control of their financial education stop working for money and start making money work for them. Whether through real estate, entrepreneurship, or mindset transformation, every story proves that wealth is built, not inherited. Kiyosaki ends the book reminding readers that you don't need permission to change your life. The opportunity to be financially free is available to anyone who's willing to learn, take risks, and stay consistent. If these stories inspired you, hit like to support the channel and subscribe for more breakdowns of books that teach real-world financial freedom. Drop a comment below Which story hit you hardest? Are you ready to build your own rich dad success story? Remember, it's never too early, never too late, and definitely never impossible. Start your financial education today. Your second chance begins now.